Hello, everybody. This is Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, we have a friend who I'm not going to read her bio, even though it's going to be on the notes for the episode, because I've known her since I think I was 10 or 11 years old, maybe even younger. Her name is Melissa Maker. We grew up together. We went to 3 schools together, and I love her to death. We've traveled. We've been to New Orleans, and other places, and we're still thick as thieves, and I'm just so excited. So I'm babbling with love. Melissa, how's it going?
Thank you. It's going well. How are you?
I'm good. It was tough getting you on the show because you're both magnanimous and animated and like lively, but you're also like sort of quiet, and so you were like podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, well, it is often my way. It was sort of a coy comment that got me into this. I feel woefully underqualified compared to a lot of your guests, but I'm happy to be here.
That's totally wrong, and it was hilarious because I have an actual list in order, and I have like friends from college, friends from high, you know what I mean? I have like this whole, and I try to space you guys out, and so it's hilarious because you were lower on the list sheerly because I was like, she's going to say no anyway, so I might as well delay it. And I was like, oh, if I have enough of her friends on, then that'll pressure her, so... And speaking of pressure and all that, how old are you? Where did you grow up? Like specifically, since I just said we grew up together, and what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
So I am 41 years old. I primarily grew up in Orinda, California, for the majority of my childhood, and I don't know that I would say that I necessarily identify with any group, but I guess with my birth, I am on the cusp of millennial and what is it, Gen Z or Gen X, one
Gen
of those.
X.
So Gen X, thank you. So I guess I would say that as is, where my birth year is, I'm probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, cool. I feel the same way. And I should actually read your bio because it's very interesting. I think people would care. She's a pediatric physical therapist, living and working in the Bay Area. But I think the other thing that, even though it's not your dominant theme of your life anymore, you're an equestrian and you've been your whole life, so I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm a physical therapist assistant.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And you have worked in horse riding programs and stuff. I mean, you're doing everything, right?
Yeah, so actually that is what got me into the area of physical therapy, is that I've ridden since I was a child and competed and done the whole gamut with the equestrian world. And when I was about 13, where I lived in the Valley in Orinda, a therapeutic riding center moved into the Valley. And so long story, but I got started there and volunteered and started teaching, and then met a wonderful physical therapist who was working there. And my career was born, and my passion for physical therapy was born there. So it's been a great way to combine passions and find my life's work.
That's so cool, and that's so awesome. And I just want to ask you like the dumbest question, but I'm going to literally phrase it the way my mind presented it to me. What do you love about horses?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. I don't know if anybody has ever asked me that specifically like that before. There's so much that I love about horses. They are so complex, but at the same time, just so simple. They will mirror sort of how you're feeling. So if you're anxious, nervous, excited, calm, they really feed off of your energy. But at the same time, like whenever I'm having a bad day or my mind's going crazy because, a million things going on in my life, I go out to the barn and I stand next to a horse and I just breathe. And my mind sort of goes clear and everything feels calmer. And there's no better feeling than galloping on a horse. So
Right on. That's cool. I did horseback ride for about 4 years of my life, and I did actually get to the point where I was galloping and all that. So I am acquainted to them, but it was so many years ago. I mean, it's really been a long. I think I got on one more time in my like early 20s. But kind of ancillary to the what do you love about horses? What do you think? Because you also love dogs. What do you think makes a horse not a dog? If that makes any sense, like what like special quality does only a horse have that a dog doesn't?
There's probably many, but the one that comes to my mind the most is that like the horse can carry you, can literally physically carry you, right?
Uh-huh.
And whereas a dog, any work you're going to be doing is on the ground or, hiking or whatever you're doing, everything is all on the ground. Whereas a horse can literally carry you off the ground, take you over jumps, whatever you choose to do in your riding career, but they can literally carry you.
That's cool. And then what about like emotionally? Is there like a big difference between the two?
I wouldn't say that there's a big difference. Just like within dogs, horses have so many different, they all have their own personality, and some are really timid and shy and quiet, and some are assertive and forward. And so I wouldn't say that there's a lot of, big difference emotionally.
Cool. And all-time list, who's your number one favorite horse you ever worked with, rode, had, all that?
Well, my heart horse was my horse that I owned from the time that I was about 15 until he passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. And his show name was Rembrandt, but his barn name was Rip.
I didn't know they had barn names. That's
so
cool.
Yeah. Just, because a lot of horses show names are really long. So often they'll have like a quote unquote nickname, but call it a barn name.
That's so cool. I love it. And have you ever had to refuse to work with a horse because it was just too unruly?
I have not in like my personal riding. I tend to like to take on those kind of challenges.
Yeah.
I always try to, take calculated risks. But there are certainly horses that we have decided are not appropriate for the therapeutic riding center, because that's a totally different undertaking.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense to me. And a couple more horse questions, and they're not planned, but they're all just coming in, percolating.
Sure.
What is the scariest horse moment you've ever had?
Oh, to pick just one. I mean, to be honest here.
No, that's cool. I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, so I mean, there have definitely been a few. The scariest is probably one of the first times I came off Rip when we were teaching him how to jump down banks, and he threw me good, and it actually knocked me unconscious. Wow. So just not being sure if I had a concussion or needed, but I've had lots of injuries over the years. I've been really fortunate that that's been about the extent of the severity. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, when you go flying through the air and you don't know how you're going to land, you don't know what's going to happen. Those are some scary moments.
So let's kind of compare this to something that's more mainstream, I guess, or that more people probably have a familiarity with. A lot of people I've met in my life played high school football, and then they've actually said to me, I would never let my kids play football. It's too dangerous. Where's horseback riding on that level for you?
I mean, from my point of view, I would say that at least the type of riding that I do and have done in the past, because you're also bringing in this animal that you can't always control, and that is so much bigger than you and outweighs you by so much. Mm-hmm. And then what I used to do, gallop at high rates of speed over solid obstacles, fences that don't come down if you hit them, things like that. I would say that horseback riding is probably more dangerous in the grand scheme of things, but I think that football players probably might get hurt more regularly, but so it's probably all relative, but I would say that horseback riding is probably potentially more dangerous.
No, that's cool. And I think that a lot of people wouldn't really know that. The only even reason I would know it's dangerous is because the guy who played Superman died when we were young.
Well, yeah, he was he was paralyzed.
They were paralyzed, yeah.
Sorry,
rather, yeah.
Yeah.
But that made it how all it takes is one celebrity and everyone's oh my god, this this thing is ravishing our society. Okay, and I think this is my last horse question. What's your greatest achievement with horseback riding?
Oh, I would say actually that my greatest achievement is not necessarily with my riding, but with the riding center, being able to bring my knowledge from riding to the riding center, both I've done therapy services and therapeutic riding services there, and just being able to bring that to the center and to the clients that I've worked with. I think that for me is my personal biggest accomplishment.
Cool. All right. So now kids and horses, discuss.
It's amazing.
What's the youngest age a kid that you've ever worked with that you've put on a horse?
So as a licensed therapist, we can start them younger. So the youngest we can do for physical therapy services, I believe, is 18 months. And we've had some that are somewhat close to that. I think about 2 is maybe the youngest that I've worked with on a horse.
Wow.
Now, mind you, I'm not just putting a 2-year-old on a horse and letting them go. Right. We have a team. A lot of the kids that I work with are quite physically involved. Mm-hmm. And so there's a person who is behind the horse, driving the horse. And there's 2 sidewalkers on each side, making sure that kid stays safe mm-hmm. in the middle of the horse.
Yeah.
And then, I am there in my therapist capacity, working on whatever goals we have established for that client.
Cool. All right, here's a philosophy thought experiment for you. It just came to me. Brilliant of me.
Okay.
There's a train, and it's headed down a track, and it can go one of 3 ways, and you can control which way it goes. In one direction, A, there's 5 dogs you don't know. In direction B, there's 5 kids you don't know. And in direction C, there's 5 horses you don't know. Where do you make the train go?
Oh, I would make the train go down to the 5 kids that I don't know, because at least I can talk to them and tell them to stop and be quiet. And
no, you misunderstood. I'm sorry. The train is going to crush and kill all 3.
Oh,
sorry.
Wow.
I should have said that. There's a famous trolley experiment, and I didn't say trolley, I said train, so there's no way you could have known what I meant. And I will not edit this. I'll just leave my foible in. But so anyway, you have a choice between killing, let's just say 1 dog, 1 horse, or 1 kid. And again, you do not know any of them.
Oh, that's mean.
You don't have to answer. It's a famous philosophy experiment, though.
I think I would put myself in front before I don't think I could make that decision. That's too much.
That's a great answer, actually. And that actually segues perfectly to the purpose of this podcast, which is to discuss morality and whether or not it's attached to religions and philosophies and stuff. So when I met you when we were young, you were but I wouldn't say you were overtly into Christianity. Are you still a Christian?
I actually don't think that I've ever considered myself a Christian.
Wow.
Okay. So it was much more of a social thing for me.
Cool.
I grew up in a household where God and religion was not really well looked upon. It was more organized religion, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't speak for either my parents. I don't think either of them believe in God, but definitely don't believe in organized religion.
Wow.
And so, it was really more like junior high and part of high school where I was going to youth groups and stuff, but it was really more the social and something to go and do with friends. And I mean, I enjoyed being able to do activities with friends that my parents, while they didn't love the religious side of it, they were fine with the social side of it and, a way to spend time with friends. Mm-hmm. And it afforded me an opportunity in high school. Each spring break, we went down and built houses in Mexico. So
that's why really I thought you were Christian. That's so crazy. Yeah. Oh, I've never bothered to ask you. I just assumed you were into it to the exact level where you don't talk about it to other people. And that was why, and I don't ask friends hey, oh my gosh.
No, sure. It doesn't, unless it comes up for some reason, you're not going to just out of the blue ask. I understand.
Wow. This is mind blowing in a really cool way.
I know, considering how long we've known each other, right?
No, seriously. So have you ever believed in God?
No.
Cool. Let's talk about that for a little bit. What reason have you, do you remember, at some point you had to be I don't believe in God. Do you remember that moment?
I think that I've kind of always had that feeling. I've never really, I've thought about it, obviously, because going to youth groups, my grandmother was very religious. So I've definitely thought about it, but I think I've always had a much more science-based mind. Mm-hmm. And so I've definitely been more of I really am more into the tangibles and I want to live a good life, or what's, quote unquote, a good life, and try to figure out right and wrong without having it dictated to me and feeling guilty if I'm not doing everything that I'm supposedly supposed to be doing and feeling like a horrible person. So that, I think that has really, I've always sort of steered away from buying into a lot of the organized parts of religion.
That's cool. That's a great answer. It's really well explained. So do you actually use the term atheist to describe yourself?
Yeah, I think that I would say that I'm an atheist. So, I think there's probably something bigger out there, maybe, mm-hmm. but so I'm not totally opposed to that possibility, but I don't necessarily believe that there's just one God out there watching over all of us. I definitely don't believe in heaven and hell. That sort of those very like traditional Christian beliefs.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like I don't think there's a word for this, but really you're like an atheist. Like you're against the idea of God, but you're not against the idea of like a mysterious something. Like
yeah, and I think that I see more validity, or I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but like in more like the Native American sort of outlook on where there's multiple, sort of spirits and gods of different things. I would say I much more believe in like the energy and power of nature, because, even trees are, plants, they're all truly living things. Yeah. But I would say that I would probably lean more to that side if I'm, trying to identify more like spiritual structure.
That's cool. You're really interesting to me. You've always had, it's what I was trying to get at in the intro. But like, you are definitely a scientific person, and you always struck me that way. But you're also like very kind and compassionate, and then you yield this like incredible sarcastic wit that you can throw at anyone at any time. And it's interesting. It's like a very interesting combination. I know some of that has to do with like who you grow up with and how you grow up. But I am curious. Like, do you believe that there's like an innate quality to you that makes you you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what makes us all unique individuals. Is we all have innate qualities that, and it's the combination of the qualities that we possess that's so uniquely individual too, right?
Yeah, cool. So I guess that would segue to the point of the podcast, which is, what do you think happens to this combination of unique qualities when she dies?
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
So the simplest answer is that I don't know. I would say that I probably have more concrete thoughts about what I don't believe. Like, I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't believe, like I said, in heaven and hell. I obviously, with the scientific minds, like either you're cremated and so then your ashes are either strewn somewhere or they're kept somewhere, or you're buried and so then you decompose and that process happens. But, I've been thinking about this knowing that I was coming on here. And I think what happens, because I don't know if I believe that we have a spirit that then stays, but I think that we all have an essence that we leave with, those who knew us and loved us and had contact with us in life. And I know that I feel like that presence or that essence, like of our friends who passed, of my family, grandparents and whatnot who have passed, people that I've loved and lost. I feel them when just something little reminds them, a memory comes through, a moment that I wish they were there for, I could talk to them, So I think that's it's more like that there's an essence that we leave with the people who knew us.
That's a brilliant, really cool answer. And obviously I'm thinking of a mutual friend that we both lost, Aaron Goldsmith. I've mentioned him enough times on here. And he passed away in his, I think, 36 of liver cancer. Yeah, and I've felt the same thing. So I would love to like ask you specifically about him. Like, when you get that feeling about him, do you feel like it's him or do you feel like it's your memory of him? Because you said kind of both, and I kind of agree with both.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it probably is both. I think that there are some times where it's my memories of him, and sometimes it's like I can literally like hear, like I can see that kind of coy smile that he would have sometimes, and I can just like, I could just imagine what he would say in a situation. But it's like, I don't really have a lot of regrets in life, but I would say what I regret mostly, if I had to talk about what I regret, is like things that I didn't do or conversations I didn't have, rather than things I did, I've done and conversations I have had. It's more the things that time, not enough time spent, not enough conversations had, those sorts of things. So I definitely have moments where I'm like, oh, I wish I could talk to this person about this. And certainly with him, I have those moments like, just remember the conversations that we used to have.
Yeah, it's crazy because I do think if there's one takeaway from his specific death to me, and I know everyone else he touched, it's that it's weird to explain this, but I know other people have said the same thing. If you lose a very, very, very dear friend like that in your 30s, but there's like this slow knowing they're going to die. It's very different from like a car accident or something, because you get a chance to reflect, and then it kind of changes all of us forever. Like I think all of us are living not our best life in like a corny Instagram way, but like we actually did like step it up, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a horrible thing for somebody, especially somebody who is so wonderful, to have to die. I feel like before, really they've had that full complete life, and he had an amazing complete life, but I just felt like there was so much more. So if there has to be a silver lining, that I would say you're right. That's the silver lining, is that he, at least for me, I know, inspired me all the time to make the most of the time that I do have that I'm here, because you never know when it's going to be gone.
Amen. And so kind of like along these similar lines, have you ever experienced like a spooky, weird, uncanny moment that you can't explain and that does make you believe that there is some sort of force?
No, I don't think so. I really, I've never been one who's like, I don't remember my dreams a lot. Never really had any dreams that are really just like, oh my God, somebody came to me in a dream, or this realization happened. And even, in waking moments, I don't know that there's ever been a moment where I'm just like, okay. Other than when I do see things like, when in my time at the riding center, I have seen horses do some amazing things. And I'm just like, how does that horse, even like have that mindset or that thought process? Like, and so I'm thinking of one thing in particular. We had this horse many, many years ago, and she was this boss mare, and she just was so like assertive and bossy and whatnot. And you'd go out on, I'd ride her, and she'd be out on the trail, and she would spin and run for home when she decided she was done. But you could put the most physically and or mentally challenged kid on her, and she would literally slow down.
Wow.
She would shift her weight if she felt that the client was getting off balance. It's just the most incredible intuitive therapy horse, but it was just such a contrast to what she could be like out in other situations, but just the most incredible horse. And so I see things like that, and I'm like, wow, there's got to be some, where does this horse come from?
Yeah, that's really cool. I like the way you connected that. That's actually like, yeah, because the older I get, the more I get into animals and nature. It's weird. Like, I always loved nature, but like from a distance / like when I was in it, I was more like concerned for my safety and stuff, and loving that. But now as I get older, I'm just like, oh man, like I wish I didn't live in a place where light pollution was. Like, I just want to see. And then with animals, it's like even more special because, like you said, they're just so full of life. But I always find it funny too, because like they're still animals, like as you said, and like even with dogs, like I remember like one time my little like lovely Pablo, who's like gentle as can be, was like snapping really bad at me and all that. So I'm kind of curious, where do you see two things going? And they're the two themes of this podcast, I would say. So in 100 years, assuming medical technology does not improve, you and I will both be long gone.
Yeah.
So with that assumption as a fair assumption, in 100 years, do you think there will be more or less organized religion on Earth?
In 100 years, I mean, I think there will be less. I think that there might not be less belief in God or religion, but I think there might be less organized religion. Just as people are finding that not everything has to be black and white, that there's a lot more gray in life than we realize when we're young. Yeah. Sort
Totally.
of the naivety of youth, right?
Yeah.
Or at least, that's my own personal hope, right? Maybe that's really skewing that's where I hope it goes in 100 years, is that people realize that there can be all kinds of shades of belief systems and religion and whatnot, so that it doesn't have to be like that you go to a church and that you believe in anything and everything that this book written by a human being tells you. So that's probably colored by my hope.
Still a good answer. And I think I interviewed a Quaker once, and he blew my mind, because what they do in church is they sit in silence. And it sounded like amazing. He's just like, there's a power when you're in a group and it's silent. I was like, yeah, I've been in meditating groups. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so that was cool because it's an organized religion, but like there's no preacher, there's no sermon. And then if you feel incredibly compelled to speak, you can just speak, but people don't like talk back to you. So you can like yell out like, love is all you need. I mean,
Well, see, and I totally appreciate that, because I love hearing about different religions and how everybody sort of, or, you know, different people have their own faith and their own beliefs and their religions. Where I have a problem is when you judge other people based on it, or you tell other people that the way they're living their life is incorrect or wrong. You know, that's where I really take more issue with it. So I love hearing that kind of stuff. And I've been listening to more of your podcasts as I've been, you know, preparing to come on here and do this video. And it's so cool listening to so many different like backgrounds, and some of the ones that I've been kind of like, oh, I don't know if this one will be so interesting, like just because it's not something that I know that I think that I really necessarily am interested in or connect with or whatever. And inevitably even if I don't have that moment of like, wow, this was one of the better ones I've actually listened to, there's always a moment of something that comes up where I'm like, wow, that's something that just has got me thinking, and I love that.
yeah, that's why I love doing it. It's funny because I don't anymore. I no longer check like downloads and numbers, and I'm no longer like interested in that side of it, and that is a huge relief. But in addition to that, it's just this is fun. Like I was like, oh, on Friday I get to talk to Melissa, and then sometimes I'm like really scared because I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk to a very random person who says that they're really into this thing that I don't know anything about. And I try to, I do limited research because I don't want to be a know-it-all. I want to be like a totally open-minded person. So it's like a fun process for me. Second part of the 100-year question. And then after that, you get the floor. I like these two questions, and I really specifically wanted to ask you same thing, but with animal rights, but not like animal rights as in like it's legal or illegal to kill or eat animals, just more like, do you think the average person in 100 years will think animals deserve more than what the average person thinks now?
I think so, and I certainly hope so, because I think that from 100 years past, it has certainly changed and gotten better. Where, you know, I think that 100 years ago, you wouldn't have found nearly as many people who think that animals, you know, have as many quote unquote rights as they do, or, you know, deserve certain things in life. And I mean, even in, you know, the animal for food industry, there's been a lot of work in that for more humane slaughter and whatnot. Just so there's more, I think, cognition and awareness all across the board. So even though we realize that we're raising these animals to be killed for other people to eat, there is still better awareness in trying to do that in a more humane way too. So I hope that just continues, you know, for the next 100 years. You know, but I think that being a meat eater myself, even though I love animals, and you know, I'm okay with the fact that there is some hypocrisy in that, and that is just part of my decisions in life. I still try to, you know, always be respectful of the fact that I am eating something that was once living and give its life up for me to eat. I don't know that I could ever kill an animal myself for that purpose. So therein lies the hypocrisy. But, you know, I just, my life is not perfect. I am not perfect. And
oh, I love it. I wish more people were as open-minded to saying the exact sentence you just said, which is like, I'm not perfect and my life isn't perfect. And I'm okay with that, though, because that's the reason it's okay. If you were saying this in a therapist's room with like tears, it would be a very different feeling I'd have right now.
Right. And at the same time, it always drives me to learn and be better and do better and, you know, all that. But I'm always just very aware that I am not a perfect person. None of us are. And that also helps me, you know, I try to keep that in mind in my dealings with other people. In everyday situations, trying to keep that in mind too. We are not perfect. We don't always react perfectly, but hopefully we are always striving to grow and to be better.
Yeah, I love it. That sounds like the final question I would answer, but do you want to add anything to it just in case?
I think just that, that along that line, just to always try to remember to take care of yourself. And, especially what we, sort of have been through as a society in the last few years, that mental health has become a much more real thing to a lot more people to take care of, but also to take care of each other. Try to remember that we all have bad days. And so even if you aren't having one of those bad days, somebody you're coming in contact with and not having a great interaction with might be having a bad day, and trying to be graceful about that. It's easier said than done, for sure. But that, it's not always something that we can control when we're just sort of reacting to our feelings.
Wow, I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh my God, that's so cool. You speak so eloquently and you answer questions like as if you were in front of like an entire auditorium. It's amazing. Putting you on the spot was one of the best things I ever did. I love it. We talk like this deeply, and we always have, but it's just fun to do it for this long,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thank you. And thank you for the compliments and the feedback on the podcast. That's exactly what I would want the average person to think, is like, hey, this was not a waste of my time, and there was at least one nugget to take away from this conversation. So you have been a great guest. Melissa Maker, everyone. She doesn't really do like the social media stuff, but I'll have whatever links she lets me. And for those of you listening at home, as always, the best way to support the show is just to head over to mikeyup.com and subscribe for free to the weekly email. And we love you, and we thank you, and we will see you soon.